Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Job Hunter podcast. I'm your host Tim French, and on this week's show we will be exploring the fascinating world of electronic music production. This is definitely one for all you trance and drum and bass fans out there, but for those attuned to more classical music, it'll still be a great listen. Before I give too much of the game away, sit back, relax, grab yourself a hot drink, and let's jump into the episode. Hello and welcome back to the Job Hunter podcast. This week it's my pleasure to welcome Damion O'Brien, music producer and music production mentor, to the Job Hunter podcast. Music is probably the most universal form of expression, and it allows us to convey complex emotions in a much more palatable fashion. Indeed, I've had TikTok sea shanties stuck in my head for weeks. Before we get into it, Damion, why don't you describe to us a little bit more about what exactly music production is to the uninitiated?
Music production, I guess, is the balancing out, starting right from scratch, from the ideas and composition, basic laying down of ideas, to the balancing out and creation of a full track. With whatever tools and inspiration is necessary. So it's quite a complex thing in its own way, because you could have a lot of different elements to that process. But in the basic, it's basically being able to get the ideas, the creative ideas that you've got in your head down, and then the whole process of putting that into something that's finished that can be listened to, can actually have a form that's listened to for an audience.
So it seems like quite an organic process. It doesn't seem like it's something that's, linear in the sense of like an engineer or, a doctor in that sense. Is it something that you have a set process for when you're doing that? Or
obviously everyone has a different sort of way of looking at this. I think there's a mix for me, because there are technical elements to it. Like you mentioned in engineering and, within actual production. So when you start to get into mixing and mastering and things like that, it is quite a technical subject. But of course, there's a lot of creativity to it as well. I think it's the marriage of the two things that come together.
Excellent. And so if we were to kind of diving into it day to day, what kind of stuff are you getting up to?
Like, because of lockdown, I'm here in my home studio quite often. And I just bought a steel drum, a little Tong drum. I've just started recording to put into a track. I'm writing sort of an ambient album, and then I release on labels as well. So I've just got an EP coming out in about 3 days' time, and then I'm finishing another track for an EP. So I tend to release 3 to 4 track EPs and work on albums as well. So loads of writing, loads of production. I'm very much into mixing and mastering, because I've taught it, but it's something that I actually enjoy. So I spend quite a bit of time experimenting, I think, with mixing and mastering. It always changes over the years. It's changed.
So obviously by the time this episode comes out, your EP will probably be live. So I'm glad, hopefully we'll get the links in the description. People can listen to it for themselves.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Would you say that music production has been something you've always been interested in? Did you want to do this when you were a kid, or did you want it to be a bin man or a fireman or something instead?
No, I was annoying people with it when I was a child. I started messing around with Dad's hi-fi and just connecting different things. I was interested in computers always from an early age, and I started trying to record things that when I was a few years ago when I was a kid, it was a lot longer than that. When I was a kid, it was harder to do. There wasn't software, so to speak, and so there was a lot of more sort of limitations with the hardware.
And who were your kind of big inspirations, if you know, as a kid? in that sense? Where do you think your style comes from?
I think as a kid, I from my dad, I listened to stuff like Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream and like electronic music like that. Early sort of electronic music. But I was into punk and hip hop and just loads of different things. I really got into sort of like Warp Records stuff, like Aphex Twin. Anything with a lot of synths and weirdness to it has always been quite influential to me. So,
Damon, how would you say music production and kind of music making has evolved over the course of your career? You know, what's been the biggest innovation that's kind of helped you as a music producer over the course of your career?
So as I started out, VST plugins, so plugins and software was just really starting to take off. And at that time I was using all hardware stuff like synths and I play guitar and bass, but like software was just kind of, really not quite there. I think over the last 20 odd years, that's totally changed. And so now it's way more accessible for musicians, all musicians, to be able to write from home with a lot of capability of being able to mix and record at really good quality. So there's obviously studios and hardware still has its place, and we still have collaboration projects and things that go on, but the home studio has come on massively, I think. So that's made music writing more accessible for everyone.
You mentioned that you've done some collaborations and collaborative work. I mean, are there any kind of well-known artists that any of our listeners might have heard of that you've worked with, or anyone particularly that stands out to you?
There's someone I've been working with who's on Ninja Tunes called Dirty Freud, who I also work with. I played after Mr. Scruff on a night on occasion. I tend to work with kind of local to this area musicians and artists when I'm releasing, but I do collaborate every now and then on stuff, but the bulk of my things are really me on my own doing what I do. So yeah, sometimes collaborations, but yeah, I'm usually kind of releasing my own stuff.
Obviously, you mentioned it as well that you play the guitar. Do you think that there's a set kind of idea of what a music producer is? Do you need to be someone that is really musical and that can play loads of instruments, or that's been classically trained at university or anything like that, or can it be a spotty teenager in his bedroom on a laptop?
It's a tricky one, really, because it's just like there's half of me thinks that people should actually have something to get into to write with. That's certainly my background, was coming from, as an instrumentalist, really, play keys as well and stuff like that. But, there's a bit of me that thinks that, like, if someone doesn't have those skills and I'm blind tested on their music and it's absolutely excellent, then why should I really be caring about what their background is? So I'm kind of torn on it. I think some of the things that we've got with the technology, the bad side is that it's too easy to be able to create, without having any skills. But on the same hand, for people who do have skills, it's moved on. So I think you have to have basic skills of being able to have some creative input into writing, whether that becomes whether you need to, play an instrument or instruments, maybe not.
And I suppose the strange thing about your career is the measure of success is effectively the court of public opinion. You put your work out and you have to wait and see what people think and if they like it or not. There's no feedback in the sense of a conventional job. Is that difficult, or does that motivate you?
I think it's difficult, and you need the confidence to be able to put your stuff out there into public listening. But you soon get used to that. It's like playing live. As you first do this, you're just like, am I going to be good enough? It's confidence. You also need that. So you need the audience, and you need to get your stuff out there for people to listen to get feedback, to get signed on labels, and to get people to actually, know what you're doing, rather than you just creating stuff from your bedroom. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like you can find yourself not doing enough if you don't get yourself out there, and so you need to do it, but you do need the confidence to do it. I just encourage anyone just to actually try it out. If you don't like it, it's like live playing. If you don't like it, you'll soon know you can still do other things. You can still write from home, for example.
You said there, being signed to a label. What exactly does that mean? Some of the listeners out there might not be so clued up on their terminology. Why are labels so important to the music industry, and what is a label?
I mean, that's shifted itself in that labels now, digital labels are easily created, and a lot of people are signed. But the real advantage, because you can DIY your own music and release it, an aggregator like CD Baby or Reverb Nation, and release your stuff yourself on Apple Music and Spotify and stuff. But the real advantage, I think, of a label is they'll promote. If you've not got time to do that, they'll promote you and get you in the right circles of people that are listening to the sort of stuff that you're releasing. So it's like having a manager in a way, someone who's dedicated to actually just dealing with your music. I do both. I do release stuff with labels, but I also DIY some of my stuff, like my ambient stuff. I tend to do albums with, and so I DIY it. And it doesn't really need a label to do that. I do my own artwork, and I promote it myself. But when there's things like EPs being put out, say they're going to be played live or played for club music or anything like that, then the label can come in because they can really promote you well. They get YouTube playlists, Spotify playlists that get a lot of listeners on there. That would take the musician a lot longer to be able to get to that side of.
So what sort of advice would you give someone that wants to get signed by a label? How do you go about doing that? I imagine if you just started out and you want to be noticed, you want to be seen, I imagine it's an absolute minefield.
It's like any artist where you've got to build up a portfolio, of your work and have something for people to listen to. That's where platforms like SoundCloud are obviously a good way to start. Bandcamp, but as long as you've got stuff out there and people can listen, you can start following threads of labels that are kind of releasing stuff that's similar to yours. You'll notice people may be listening to your music. You can send demos out, of course, the traditional way of doing it. It's really getting sort of a bit of networking, getting to know who else is releasing sort of, or in a similar situation to you, releasing similar material. So that's really the way to start off. And then once that starts, you can create a website. You can have a lot of different sites, social media, and so on, and grow your image from there. Sort of grow what you're doing with your music from there.
And how do you think music has changed? That's probably quite a broad question, but obviously music is heavily influenced by pop culture. It's heavily influenced by what's going on in the world. And obviously we've seen, musical genres massively changed even the last couple of decades, and the growth of hip hop and a lot of more urban music. Where would you predict, the music scene will go in the next 10, 20 years?
Ooh, that is a hard question.
I ask the hard questions.
Yeah, it has changed massively. I think it's more of a melting pot of a lot of different styles now. They used to have programs on. There was a program called the Chart Show on the TV, if you remember it, which basically separated out, like it'd have like a rock chart, a dance chart, and stuff like that. It's not really, you see it done, but everything's mixed up a lot more. So I think genres are kind of edging out, and it's funny because musicians are doing what I do is releases multiple playlists and doing different styles, and I think more and more people are doing that. Whereas you used to be into just one type of music, I think people are writing more types of music because people are listening to more types of music as well. Where that can go next, obviously, streaming media, and you have the access now to, with like Spotify and Apple Music, you have the access to so much music now. that it feels to me it's a little bit saturated. Like you hear things and like as soon as a style comes in, I've been listening to where they cross over soundtrack and electronic stuff. People like John Hopkins and Kelp and people like that, and that's been done so much now that it's saturated, and so then it needs to move on. And the music trade is like that; it goes in trends, and I'm imagining that is going to continue on, even though it's now more digital, so it's more streamed. It's given us more access. I think those trends will still carry on.
So if you could describe to me kind of one bonus about your job and one kind of drawback, what a difficult thing that you find about your job, just to give a bit of context to some of our listeners.
Difficult is always time. I think it's what anyone's going to say in a creative industry. I have to work. I work as with a full-time job in the creative industries as well, but that means that my studio time is really important to me, that I actually am productive. So I have maybe 1 or 2 hours per night where I need to mix or I need to write something. I've got to get on with it, which is fine. I'm a pretty productive person, but that's something that's really can be difficult at times with music because you've got a lot of other things going on in your life. That's probably the hardest thing is time.
And what would you say?
One thing question?
I said, what would you say the positives are? What would you say is the main positive?
The positives are so many. I think with being able to do something that is creative, you're going to get enjoyment, and it has a weird way of giving you massive fulfillment, relaxation. It's just such a great thing to be able to get something back off. Obviously, when you hear other people talking about it, like any art form, it's really nice if someone notices you and notices your work, and so you can get a buzz off that playing live when we will be playing again. Is obviously something that a lot of people enjoy as well. There's a lot of enjoyment, but really for me, the biggest thing of it as a plus point is the actual process. I absolutely love the process of songwriting. So for me, in a way, it's an addiction, but it's also a nice addiction to have in that it's something that I have put in my everyday lifestyle because I enjoy it so much.
So you talk about the process, but what exactly is your process? And I mean, I hope this isn't like a trade secret and everyone's going to start copying this, but if you could kind of just break it down for us a bit, like, where do you start? Because obviously it must be really hard to go, right, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to make a song. Like, it's not that simple, is it? You must have, do you use like a little thing in your head that's going round and round, or how do you get on with it?
Yeah, it's always different, but I have loads of ideas, starting off with influences. Like I might watch something, or there might be something I know it sounds boring, but something in the news. And there's so much stuff going on at the moment that I can never stop being influenced by life anyway. But I'll write stuff down I'll put stuff in my phone, as ideas. So right from the start, I'm thinking about just ideas that will kind of influence whether something's going to be darker or more chilled or whatever it is. And I'll write words, to think about that. And then I go into the studio for a session and I'll just be thinking, right, I need this kind of instrument. If it's like a really chilled session, I'll be thinking, well, this is sounding nice and felty, or this is sounding, if it's a bit edgier sound, this is dark, this is metally sounding. And that might go with some of the themes of what I've been thinking. So if it's something a bit of a darker theme, I'm starting to think of like something that could be more cinematic and a bit more edgy in that way. So yeah, that's how the whole process starts out. And then I don't know what happens as far as like, I just go with it. So it's kind of unknown, and I just do it. But that's where it starts out, always by influences.
So if we could just divert away a bit from these kind of questions, I do a little section in the middle of my podcast called Tim's three tips. It's effectively where I asked my esteemed expert guests to give some advice to our listeners that they can take away and put into their everyday lives. So obviously you're a music producer, you make music for a living. What would you say are kind of three fundamentals or three tips you'd give to someone for creating a good piece of music? What's the building blocks in essence?
Three tips. Try not to become obsessed with the tools. Easier said than done, but we've all been there and all do it, and it just takes up too much time. So spend the time on the music as much as you do thinking about what's used to create the music. Have confidence in yourself. I know that sounds like an obvious, self-help type tip, but it is a up and down ride. Doing something creative like music, in that you're not always going to get what you think you're going to get from it, and it changes. But you've got to stick with it, and so your confidence needs to be there. You'll get back with time as long as you stick to it, and you're always going to get there. Then that's number two, and number three. Enjoy yourself with it. I know, again, that sounds kind of corny, but I think if you put too much pressure on yourself, you can end up making it a chore, and you can hear that in music because it comes out as unnatural. Then, if someone's not enjoying doing it, there's loads of music that gets created and it's maybe well produced, but boring, or it's, there's not even, the production hasn't been lovingly done, let's say, and it's just by numbers. Again, because of high expectancy sometimes on people and from the industry sometimes, for people to do things in a fashionable way. And you've got to forget all that a lot of the time. If you see what the experts say, people who've been in there for years, they'll often not be following the rules that the magazines and the media will be saying, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. They'll just say, I've never done that. And yet they're quite successful, So I think sometimes just taking a bit pressure off yourself and thinking, I'm enjoying this, I don't care, is always a good way.
So what would you say is kind of like one of the biggest barriers that you and your peers are facing at the moment with regards to what you do?
I mean, the obvious one is the live scene is pretty much not available. So a lot of people I know, are struggling because the music industry itself has had to adapt and change for that. Again, suggesting to anyone to stick in there and keep going with it. But I think that's probably the biggest barrier for people, is obviously the live side of things at the moment. You're going to get a lot of people writing a lot from home with the lockdown. So in a strange way, there's a lot of creativity going on because of where we are at the moment in our current situation. But live is the side that, it's just not happening. So if you are thinking about performing or trying to go in a band or that's what you want to do, keep there. We talk about it with where I work a lot, and people are booking. It's going to be happening again. It's just going to take a little bit of time before that starts up, of course.
You mentioned your other job a little bit. Obviously, I've said in the introduction you're like a music production mentor and you do one-to-one sessions. What exactly is that about? What do you do?
Well, I mean, I'm a technician mainly, so I'm a specialist in music software. So I'm plugins, all the DAWs, the digital audio workstations that get used to create music, the studio setups, everything like that is what I deal with students. So actually learning and educating in that. But the mentoring and one-to-one sessions are basically designed for people who really want to tailor something to say they want to spend some time on EQs, or they want to spend some time songwriting because they can't quite finish a song off, or they might want to spend some time with something specific like Ableton, or I tend to help by specialising in these things. I tend to help people by, taking them through on their own, one-to-one, to get through to those steps. And then mentoring is, we did a thing with a load of students swapping over with a sound school in Berlin, where they were about to do, just before all of this changed everything, they were about to do a live festival there, which obviously got canned. But I was mentoring people to how they could do like a live performance with electronic music, but with visuals, and so VR and stuff like that. And I was helping them to think about what they're going to need to be able to do that performance. So I've done stuff with a classical pianist where they wanted to be able to record in a certain way. And so just various things that come along to do with the studios, recording and music production.
And do you think kind of giving back to the community, to the industry is as important as the work you produce?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, we're all part of that. There's always definitely like a family feel to the music industry, which is good because you can get support off people. People can talk about things. There's a lot of forums out there. You can always think I'm in the same position as someone else here, and not think you're out there on your own. But yeah, it's important that the people from all of the creative industries, I think, help each other out and support each other, especially through times like this.
So, if you had to really think about it, what kind of mark do you want to leave on the music industry? If when you retire, or anything like that, what do you want to be known for when it comes to that time?
I mean, I've got, I guess, a back catalogue of music that's kind of personal to me, but it's been released and so on, and it's great that people have followed that. I'm kind of happy with what that is, and always hungry to write more. So I guess at the end of that, retiring with that, I don't know what the feeling will be there. Because at the moment, how I can feel is like I'll have to be dead in the ground before I stop, or someone shoots me or something. So I'd be happy to have the sort of releases that I've released. I'm proud of what I've done, and happy to have done
that. Again, if we could kind of take it to the here and now, could you think of any particularly good examples of well-produced music or good producers, that you particularly admire at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, I was mentioning Kelp earlier on. I've really got into that guy's stuff. Alexis Pereira as well, who's a guy who does a lot of like ambient sort of stuff. I mean, I like a lot of ambient stuff, but with synths, so going back to sort of the 80s synth wave, but a lot of nice sort of film soundtrack sounds. So many electronic artists, but so many artists as well to mention. I think, to be honest, if I'm thinking about sort of groundbreaking producers, I think Aphex Twin for me was, and still was so out there and different for the time. Him and Boards of Canada really for me were the original decent sort of different electronic artists that kind of it's them straight away. The productions, songwriting, and complete productions can only be them, and that's very influential.
So I think we mentioned it a little bit briefly before, when we were talking about benefits and everything. But if you could really distill what it is that you love the most about making music and working in this industry, what do you think it would be?
It's the building process. I think of writing. I think it's writing. I think that's where this what it boils down to for me is literally the process of writing. Getting something from nothing and creating something. I'm not very much one for cover versions, and I do remix stuff, but I love the process of creating something from nothing. It's building, basically. It's literally building. I think that is the defining thing for music for me.
Damian, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on and then to talk to you about all your work. Obviously, like I said, your EP is coming out. It probably will be out by the time this episode goes out. So where can people find out more about you and about your music and everything like that?
I've got a lot of online presence in there's a website, Music of Damion O'Brien, and then all my artist stuff is up on Spotify, Apple Music, and then distributed on like Juno, Beatport, and so on. But yeah, so Afferent, Cassini Division, Designer Thumbs, and The Dark Matter. It's all my aliases, stuff that's out there. But if you go for Music of Damion O'Brien, you'll be able to find it because it's all there.
Excellent. You're a man of many faces and many personas.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a psychological thing.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Stay safe. I hope 2021 is productive and fruitful for you, and I hope you can get back and doing some live performances again at some point, because it'd be cool to come and see you.
Cool, thank you.
Massive thanks to Damian for coming on and chatting to us all about his life in music. It's my pleasure to say that his new EP is available now at junodownload.com. Just search The Dark Matter red and green pin lights to find it, or check out the links in the show notes. If you want to find out more about Damian's music, go to his website. It's www.damionobrien.wixsite.com/music of Damion O'Brien to find out more. And again, that'll be in the show notes too. If you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It'll help to boost the show's status and in turn reach more people. You can find us on social media. It's @JobHunterPod on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, where you can also find our support group. This is a space for you to all share ideas, get more info about the jobs and people featured in the show, and to give any feedback on how you want the show to look in the future. Subscribe to our YouTube, where you can find some extra clips from the recordings. Just search Job Hunter Podcast. If you fancy coming on, or you want to share any of your job-based little wins, feel free to drop us an email. It's jobhunterpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening this week to the Job Hunter Podcast. I'll see you next time for another deep dive into another interesting profession. Hello and welcome to the Job Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Tim French. Have you ever wondered what it takes to become a fighter pilot? Or perhaps you've always wanted to be a fly on the wall inside an operating theatre. Maybe you're just interested in finding out more about some of Britain's most intriguing professions. Come along and join the virtual careers fair as I ask the nation about their vocations. From barristers to butchers, scientists to supermarket heroes and everything in between, the Job Hunter Podcast will delve beneath the job title and talk to people at the heart of their professions. If you want to be involved, then get in touch. There is no job too small, no tale too tall. So sit back, relax, grab a cuppa, and enjoy the show.